Welcome to Fueling Conversations, a sport nutrition education network podcast with Dr. James Fleming. In today's episode, we're joined by Sophie Harries, a dual career practitioner who works as a nutritionist for Derby County Football Club while pursuing a PhD focusing on optimising recovery for elite players. Sophie shares her experiences navigating both the academic space and professional sport, balancing time, managing expectations, and conducting meaningful research within a high-performance environment. She also walks us through the process of applying for her PhD and offers a behind-the-scenes look at her research. This conversation is full of practical insights for students and practitioners considering an applied PhD. Sophie highlights the importance of passion, relationship building, and staying grounded in both science and practice. It's an honest and inspiring look at what it means to embed research into elite sport. Let's get into it. Hi guys, today we're really lucky to be joined by Sophie Harries, who is a dual career practitioner and PhD student. And I really wanted to do this session because often in my role as an academic, we have lots of students that want to progress onto PhD research. And there's been a big growth in the idea behind being a practitioner and doing a PhD at the same time embedded within a professional environment. So super happy to have you on today, Sophie, to share your experiences and insights as you're actually living it as we go. So are you happy to introduce yourself and let us know what you're kind of up to?
Yeah, so my name's Sophie Harries. I previously worked as a dietitian in the clinical world, but then after COVID, I've stepped into sports. So I work for Derby County at the moment as an assistant nutritionist for the first team, but the lead academy nutritionist. And then I'm also doing my PhD in optimizing the recovery strategies of these elite players.
And how did it come about? Because I know we've had a little chat before this, but how did this all come about and what does it look like? Because how do you juggle a full-time PhD and working in professional sport? Two questions there.
Yeah. So I think how it came about was almost like right project, right time. So it was just as I was finishing my master's and I was working in women's football at the time, and I was sort of getting feedback from athletes that they knew how to fuel or they had understanding of fueling from sports nutrition, but recovery was essentially something they completely forgot about. So it kind of became my mantra of fuel for the work required, recover from the work done. And then I saw the PhD and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like perfect for me, working in football in the elite environment, talking about recovery. Genuinely didn't think I got it when I interviewed for it as well. So that's always a lesson to everybody. You always do it better than you think. And then now it's looking at, so at the moment we're looking at the season-long data of what the players are doing to recover, what's the difference between like an away game, an evening game, early kickoff, those sorts of things, the strategies that they're putting in place, but with a nutrition perspective on it rather than like just a sole sports science perspective. So my role is essentially in the club when the players are in the club as much as possible. Obviously, it's coming towards the end of the season at the moment, and it's a little bit of a tight time for us. So it's all hands on deck, trying to get together and make sure the season goes as we want it to. So that would be providing support to the players. So, for example, tomorrow is going to be preparing for our travel day on Friday, lots of smoothies, energy balls, those sorts of things, the real hands-on applied stuff, but also doing body composition assessments for the academy. So you kind of switch between different things and then using the time when the players are maybe resting or traveling to then do a literature review or do some reading or something like that. So really sort of blocking out times and getting the bits done that you need to get done and using the off season to my advantage really for the PhD.
I love that. We're going to delve into how you manage your time because I think that's such a daunting prospect from a lot of people that look at these kind of roles. Can we just go back into that initial part? So this is a funded PhD to my knowledge, right?
Yes,
Can
yeah.
you just talk us through the application process and then a little bit about the interview, actually? It'd be quite useful to know.
Yeah, so the application process, I had to write a research proposal. So 500 words is about what I wanted to do. And then I had an interview, and there were about 5 people on the panel. So they're mainly representatives from the university, and then a representative from Derby County. And he was the one that made me think I hadn't got it because he just sat back and he didn't take any notes. He had his iPad and he put it down as soon as I started presenting. And I was like, nope, not interested in me. So it was an hour-long interview, just talking about what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it as well. And I think my clinical role, where I started doing research during COVID, and I saw the benefit of applied research there, that really was testament to why I wanted to do it in an applied setting, because I've got that experience and I can see the benefit of it. So yeah, it was a stressful process, but it also made me really think why I want to do it and what is the difference between an applied PhD and a lab-based PhD, for example.
Perfect. And can you just expand on that aspect? So you've mentioned that you're doing all this research around recovery. Is that predominantly in the first team, or is that across the entire landscape of Derby County?
So it's across the first team and the under 21s as well. So trying to get as many different ages in there as well. So essentially, as soon as a player turns 18, I'm having that conversation about them participating in my research. So big builds a big data set, but it's really important to see what the difference is between our 33, 34-year-olds and our 18, 19-year-olds. What are they doing differently? And our squad age of our senior team is on the older side. So how are we making sure these players are available to support the team and to participate in training and meet the real high demands that the championship is at the moment, when in sort of football terms they're coming towards the end of their career.
Really interesting. And I guess, like you say, it's trying to come up with real action-based research that's going to have real tangible assets for the club in hand. And it's hard to get that balance right. So how did you come around the kind of research question, or was it already posed? And then how do you actually devise a research strategy and the project when you're in the field? Because I have had students in the past embedded in places, and it's so chaotic professional sport. How do you actually go, this is what I think I can actually achieve? And then has it deviated across the last year or so that you've been there?
Yeah, so where it's a funded PhD with Derby, some of the questions I didn't have necessary full control over. So the paper that I've just published on the glucose monitor, that was an initiative that they wanted to explore. Um, I came into that with real skepticism, being like, it's not going to show anything, it's going to be a waste of my time. I'm really proud to have ate some humble pie on that one, but that's science for you. And so then the other ones, the objectives set by the club were quite vague. They just want me to optimize recovery and essentially be able to, by the end of my PhD, deliver a recovery menu, which there's some out there, there's lots out there, but to be a bit more specific for players based on their age, for example, and also more nutrition focused. And that was something they were happy to have the conversation with around that because of my background of nutrition, not sort of saying they need to be in a cold water bath for 15 minutes. That's not my remit. I could tell them how many carbs they're going to have and what that needs to be. That's more my background. And the club were really open to that as well. So that's where I've kind of looked at it and gone, what do we not know? And we don't know what players in the championship are doing recovery wise. What is the difference between a home and away match or different kickoff times? Because the research is predominantly either in tournament football or the big five leagues. So that drop down and the difference between the Premier League and the Championship is huge. Like we can see it just in the league table from the teams that get promoted and things like that. So what is the difference there? Because we don't travel with an ice bath, but if we're at home, they have an ice bath. So what the impact of that and that post-match recovery. So making something that is going to be something that the club can implement given the constraints that are there, and just having that awareness and being around the club and observing initially whilst I was conducting that first study that the club wanted to do has then helped me formulate my questions going from there. But yeah, things don't necessarily go to plan. Changing of match fixtures, the clash between university close time and football close time is something that I'm experiencing at the moment with our end of season testing. Um, so logistics and admin, I think I've got very good at the moment. But it's just being flexible and being adaptable and trying to problem solve different solutions, and also put into people who may not be invested in your research or like that particular bit of your testing and see the bigger picture. Why are you getting them to go across to this campus? It's going to just be a bit of a logistical nightmare. Translating that into something that they can understand and they can appreciate. So, for example, DEXA scanning, the players love it. The players get so much information from it, and the engagement is huge that the players find it worthwhile. So always relaying back to people who aren't from a science background, who are higher up, saying, well, the players really ask the players, they like it. They want to do that. They might not like it when I stab their finger or they get them to jump when they're feeling sore. But that then is the sports science team find that useful. So there's different benefits and it's how you translate that to people across the club.
I think that's really good advice in trying to get people on board at all levels, and it's quite a difficult skill to do that. I'm sure you've had some challenges and probably ongoing challenges in that space. Can you talk us through that first study and then what you're then looking at as your subsequent studies?
Yeah, so the first study was the players wore a glucose monitor for a month. So we did a control period where they reported all of their food to me, wore the glucose monitor for a month, continued to do a photo food diary as well for that period. So it's 6 weeks of dietary analysis.
Wow.
And what we were able to see is the difference of the impact of training and the impact of match play. So for one player, he would always get really heavy sweating episodes, racing heart rate before a match. And we kind of thought it was anxiety attack related. He was also at that time having low blood glucose. So it then made a direct strategy that we could implement and player safety as well at that point. Other findings that we've got from it is that players who are using snus or nicotine pouches, it's increasing their blood glucose as they're taking it, even at periods of rest on rest days. So we're now doing another study with a master's student to see if that is the same for everybody else and just expanding our population that we're studying from that perspective. And then other benefits we kind of saw is just helping with that fueling and recovery. So seeing the difference between a match day +1 and a match day -1, the impact on their basal blood glucose levels and how we fuel them and the optimization and the timings of that is something that we've taken forward and just sort of finessed at the club, really.
And then what's the ultimate goal? Because I think it's really novel, and obviously the continuous glucose monitoring space has kind of blown up since the Zoe kind of initiation. What's the outcome kind of aims, if you like?
So for that study, the ultimate goal is now we've kind of got an idea as to when best to fuel our players for an evening game, for example. That's so challenging on that recovery side of things when they're on the coach back for 4 hours or something, and it's God knows what time at night. For our player that observes Ramadan, we know the impact of that as well. For him, we know what his biological status is like. Obviously, it's so individual, and that's something that we don't have like a blanket approach to players across the club. But the players that participated are key players within the team, and then have that bespoke individualized advice. So long term, it would be getting more players to have that period. I wouldn't necessarily say you need 4 weeks of it. You don't need a 6 week food diary for it. Within 2 weeks, we had enough data because you get it minute by minute.
Yeah.
The ideal would be to be able to be at matches and see that response. So when our players are dropping their blood glucose levels, you'll see if you watch any of the derby games, we've got little stations now, rather than launching gels across the pitch like we were at that moment reactively. We've been a bit more proactive, and there's a few different stations around a different concentration of carbs, so players know. But those players who took part in the study have provided education to other players about the
Nice.
symptoms they were experiencing. So even if they haven't taken part, if they're feeling a bit crampy, if they're feeling a bit lethargic, they know which product out of our little selection to go and try.
I love that. It's like real personalization that can still be applied. And I think when you hit the people that are the most impactful players for you to start with, with everything that needs to be like a pilot, then that can always drip feed to those that are looking up to them, the aspirational kind of aspect to it. Um,
Yeah, we've got one player who he loves numbers and he loves data. And he also wasn't one that we kind of felt like we needed to know a little bit more about what was going on for him. But because of his impact within the squad and we know he would love the data, he took part. And yeah, it's been huge for him.
And you just took me through. This might be a bit kind of tongue in cheek, but you walking in, hi, I'm Sophie, PhD student. Here's a glucose monitor. That's probably not a hard sale at the moment with everything online and stuff. What I now want you to do is a 6 week food diary. Like I can only imagine in some environments you're like, I am gonna get hammered. What happened next?
Yeah, I did. I definitely did. Particularly when I'm messaging them, being like, "You've not sent me a picture of your tea. What did you have for tea?"
Wow.
I think it's that relationship you build with the players. We've got a really good group of players. I can literally go up to any of them and say, I'm doing a talk to the under 12s today. They want to know what you're doing. You're free at this time because I know your schedule, come along, and they will. So I think that relationship with players is really key to foster early on, but also having the backing of your colleagues as well. I had the backing of the medical team, I had the backing of the sports science team, head of performance. It was like, this is going to give you benefits, and these are the reasons why. You might be burdensome, but trust me, Sophie's got it worse. And then showed you the data that I'm generating. They're like, oh yeah, we'll let you do that. And you can put it into little snippets. Even like the DEXA scans, the lads love it. We've got a player that's moved on. He's had a DEXA scan since, and he's like, can you put this information that I've been sent into the format that you gave
Yeah,
it to me
nice.
so I can understand the difference between them. So fostering relationships is the best thing to
And
do.
that buy-in space is really important because you do hear of stories where, you know, there's a PhD available, you'll be dropped into an environment where you're working, you're meant to be doing 40 hours plus a week on your PhD, and then you're maybe asking to be doing the same in person as a nutritionist. And there's a bit of a blurred line in there sometimes in terms of, do they want a nutritionist that may be a little bit cheaper? Let's be completely transparent here. Or do they want the PhD? And I think that is tough. And we understand constraints in all environments, particularly Championship and below, because we talk about Premier League and there's often more resourcing, even still can sometimes be tight. So it's so important to get that buy-in from those on the ground. And it sounded like that's been really key to you. Was there anyone, or you don't have to name names, was there anyone that you made this challenging for you? And can you share any insights on how you maybe managed to get them to be on board? Because it's not always as straight sailing as everyone's, all in.
Yeah, no, there's definitely has been some challenging personalities. And sometimes I believe it's come from a place of maybe not fully understanding what my role is. So it's just providing that communication and that clarity to them. Like, I'm not coming for your job, don't worry. Football's very competitive, and then sometimes it relates into that into the staff. Other things is more academia is not worth the paper it's written on. That's kind of a phrase that I've had sometimes.
Wow.
And it's makes you think for a bit, but it also makes you kind of be inventive and show your worth a bit more. So if it is the case of showing my findings and the data earlier than I would have planned to, then I've done that as well to show the benefit of it, to say this is why it's important, but also just stand your ground. You're there with the backing of the club. You're just as valuable to the club as they are as well. And it doesn't matter if they've got 20, 30 years experience. Like, I am here because the club believe in my role and
Yeah.
believe in me ultimately. So that's something
And
I've really stood by. I'm like, right, this is my role
yeah.
to kind of safeguard it really.
And you're all there for the same reason, right?
Yeah.
The reason that you've invested 3 years of your life to try to improve the knowledge base specifically in that club, like that's powerful. And like you say, sometimes just letting them know about that is all that's necessary. And translating, your reasonably heavy science into practice is something that maybe we take for granted sometimes in the academic space and something we need to be better at. So it's really good insights you've shared with us there in terms of making sure that they are understandable by everyone and don't assume people's knowledge, even if they've been through the process of getting that PhD student in. So can we spend some time around kind of balancing the roles? Because I've alluded to the idea that on paper full-time PhD I think is 40 hours a week on your research. And then if we spoke before we started about you being there maybe 5-6 days a week at Derby at the moment. So how does it actually work? And I know you're really meticulous because I taught you on your MSc, and I know you're very strategic. But how on earth do you do this?
Um, when you sent that question through, I genuinely thought, how do I do it? I don't have the magic answer. I think it is being adaptable, and it is making the days when the players aren't in, and or it's maybe a quieter day. So like if we're traveling at 4 hours away and they're leaving at lunchtime, that afternoon I'm packing everything up and I'm working on my PhD. Or if they're not in, I'm doing some deep focus work, but also communicating back. So my university do writing days and writing
Right.
retreats. And that's so helpful for me because I can pre-book it in advance and I'm like, look, on this day, I'm going to a writing retreat. And you don't set yourself a target, but you also talk to a few other researchers and they're like, oh, if I do 500 words a day, I'm happy. And I'm like, all right, okay. Like, it takes a little bit of the pressure off because then in the off season, that's when I really focus on my analysis and my writing. But that hybrid between the two is something that I really struggled with. Where do I sit within a PhD world? Where do I sit within a practitioner world? And finding that own identity and how to plan things and sort of if I'm sat reading a paper when they're training, making sure when someone comes in, I'm available for them as well. Like, but I've been out in training with my headphone, with one headphone in and a lecture on my phone. Like sometimes that's just what you have to do. And you do just have to kind of set your priorities to be like small, achievable tasks when the players are around, like just cleaning up your data or
Nice.
something like that. It's little
Yeah.
chunks every now and again, and you just slowly chip away at it, really. And that's kind of how I see it.
I think it's really good advice for anyone who's either doing a PhD or who's thinking about it. Those writing retreats, and there's some free ones available, and most universities I know do them. I found them super powerful and super important to have like-minded people in completely different areas. I remember speaking to someone about theology,
Yeah.
and it just means that you can stay focused and accountable because it's hard, and sometimes you can probably feel quite isolated in your space. And then I guess, are there other PhD students at Derby that you can kind of bounce ideas from?
No, so I'm the first PhD student at Derby that they've had. So it's a learning curve for me as to like how to manage my time, but it's a learning curve for Derby as to what their expectations are as well.
Nice.
So
Trailblazing.
yeah, yeah. Bumbling through, I think we would devote sometimes it feels like, but it's something where we have that conversation constructively because ultimately they want to see my success. I want to see the team's success. I will now forever love the club because of the ethos around the
Yeah,
club.
yeah, brilliant.
So and it's not just the support team, it's like the media team want to know what I'm doing and things like that, and they'll always have your back as well. So
Yeah.
if I need half an hour to do some deep research, I could pop into their office. So then I'm not in the gym where you're going to get tapped on the shoulder. Can I have this? Can I have that? Can you help me with this? So there's that ability to do that at the club as well, which is really helpful.
I really like that. It's really refreshing to hear as well. It sounds like they're in a really nice starting point in their journey to try and get research embedded, and you hear some real great stories around how clubs are doing it well. I guess one of those things I wanted to spend some time on, you were alluding to there in your previous answer, was managing expectations, both from them and yourself, because you can easily, and I'm just talking on my personal journey in the PhD, that I often felt quite overwhelmed as a part-time PhD student and had a full-time job alongside it. So I think managing the expectation around what you are going to achieve and what they're expecting from you and other people enables you to have a bit more clarity. And I can only imagine in your space that must be super important.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very clear on the expectations that Derby have got from me. They want something that, like you say, they can implement and have ongoing following my PhD and my time there. With my supervisors, that's been really helpful about their expectations of my PhD as well. And my supervisor has always said, I'd much rather you write less, but it's higher quality than write more and it's poorer quality. So I've got a really good understanding of what my supervisors want from me as well. And it's having those conversations early. So I was really lucky by being thrown in literally on day two,
Mhm.
being asked to go and ask these players that I've never met before, right, I need your phone number so you can send me pictures of everything that you eat. Bit uncomfortable, but it set the expectation of my role in Derby straight away. And by doing that study, first of all, it then set my expectations with my supervisors straight away. It wasn't like, oh, go do some reading for 6 months, which is what I've heard from other PhD students. Like, I know what my supervisors now want from a publishable paper. And yeah, it took a lot of amends. It was a really steep learning curve. And at sometimes I did feel really overwhelmed because I was like, I'm never going to get there. How am I going to do it? But it is that mentality of if I just keep chipping away a little bit and a little bit and get a little bit more clarity. And a PhD, you're not expected to know everything. It's the process of learning. And it's the process of asking questions all the time. Like, I don't know this, particularly in academia, there's such a hidden curriculum behind it. And it's your supervisor's job to teach you that, but it's also being an applied setting is how can that applied setting fit into the curriculum of academia and academia fit into the applied setting. And that's kind of the messy bit
Yeah.
that you have to figure out as you go, really.
I think it's really good, and what I was told it always stuck with me was that you're a trainee researcher at your PhD student, and if you get some publications out there, then you've done a great job. And sometimes actually being thrown in the deep end early on and doing some applied research is probably better than doing your you know heavy lit review straight off the back. Now, obviously, every PhD is different, and that might have just been a good way to get you embedded and worked for Derby. So yeah, really appreciate your answer there. If we move on to the next kind of bit, so we spoke about time management, and that sounds chaotic, but it sounds like you're doing a good job. Can you give us a bit of advice for maybe practitioners that might be doing a kind of a dual PhD, and anything that has really kind of resonated with you and helps your journey so far work? And any advice for those that might be looking into them? Because I know just last week there's an opportunity for another going to be a championship club. They just got promoted last week, doing a very similar kind of approach.
Yeah, so anyone doing it at the moment, you're not alone. And I think you can feel alone, particularly because you tend to be the only one in your club. Other like bigger clubs might have a few, but you're all very different. So yeah, if anyone's in like the sports science world and doing a PhD, I'm happy to have like a little support group going forward. Anyone looking at it, it's for me, the reason I took the PhD is because I was so passionate about recovery, and you have to do something that you're passionate in. It's not cool and sexy to be working for a club if your actual research and the reason you are there is something you don't care about, because it will make it so much harder, and you get that sense of overwhelm, and you will get that sort of burnout much quicker. And I think that's something that I sadly learned when I was working in the NHS. And doing the research during COVID, I burnt out, so I know what it feels like. And I know I don't want to do that again. So when I'm writing or when I'm reading about recovery, it's because I genuinely want to read about it. It's not because it's a task that I have to do. And particularly like an evening match after that, sometimes like you just want to have the rest day, like all of your other colleagues are doing, having a lie-in, but you know, like you might have a meeting to attend, you've got ethics to do or something like that. And if you can keep in the mind of, I'm doing this because I genuinely like it, not because it's cool and sexy to be working for whatever team it is. Because the reality is, and I'm sure most people tell you, it's great. It is really good. The highs are really high, the lows are really low. And sometimes it is a real slog when things aren't going your way to turn up and to push your research and to get that engagement. So you need to be the one that's championing it and be passionate and be that sort of salesperson, really.
I think you've articulated that so well. I was typing away, but just as you started that question, and I wrote down passion for the area, how important it is. And I can see that in all your answers. I can see how much you love it, and it is so important. Like you say, if you go and say, "I'm just going to do a PhD because that's what other people say you need to do to be successful," and there is a little bit of that narrative being spun, around. There's some very successful people that have got PhDs and they're working in some highly sought after roles. Now, to be a top practitioner, you need to have knowledge. Of course, you need to keep continuing your professional development and all those things. But do you need to have a PhD to be the best practitioner? Arguably not. So I think that passion space in whatever we do, and that's one of the key reasons why we're doing this podcast, is that we want people to essentially try to enhance the field. And it's really good that and so clear that you're loving this area. I think it's such an important thing that anyone doing a PhD, not just in a dual career space, it's going to take you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to do. So make sure that you're doing something that's important to you, and you might have a predetermined idea or topic area like you've walked into, but how can we shape that? How can we ask questions? How can we be intuitive? How can we lead the research? It's your research. Yes, you've got a supervisory team that want you to answer some questions, but you do have scope to go away and direct it, which some people don't always see before
Yeah.
they embark on a PhD.
Yeah, definitely. So like my PhD, I'm focusing a lot on nutrition, but my supervisors, most of them have not looked at nutrition. Like their expertise are not in nutrition. I have one whose expertise is in nutrition, but not in sports nutrition as well. So sometimes saying like, right, I really want to do this has made me justify it a little bit more. But also sometimes you are going to fall out of love with your PhD because it can get really heavy. And that happened with me with the glucose paper. But I went to a conference, I presented it, I spoke to my peers about it, and then I was like, yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I know my job, I know my stuff. So by having the passion, you don't have to have the passion for 3 to 8 years. You will have ebbs and flows, but if you genuinely want to make a difference in in that area, that's what's going to get you through those 8 years.
And I think going to conferences, networking with like-minded people, you've embedded that in all your answers. You know how important that is. Like as a PhD student, can you dip into, keep the CPD going, use some of your budget to go to conferences and talk to other people that are in your space and enable your research to come to life? Because sometimes you feel like, God, if I read this paper one more time, I'm going to punch myself in the face. So, and I couldn't care less about continuous glucose monitoring at this stage because I've read it till, whatever. So, everyone's going to feel that too, and I think it's a really nice answer and articulated really really well. I just want to, before we start wrapping up because I'm conscious of time, can you just talk us through, and I might have shifted back a bit here, your last week in practice? So can you talk me through what it looked like and what you achieved?
Okay, so the last week, we've just come off of the back of a lull of not having many games, and now we've gone into sort of a lot of 2 game, 3 game weeks. So the last week has kind of been everyone coming back and not re-shifting focus and restarting. The focus has always been there, but just that nitty-grittiness again, and that's something the manager really has, is like, we are not victims, we are fighters. And that has been the mentality this last week. So it's been things like we've got a new initiative of smoothie bars. So I feel like a barista most
Nice.
mornings and lunchtimes. I run around with the cups and a Sharpie, taking their orders, writing what milk they want.
Give it a mint.
Yeah. So there's that bit. And then we've also been doing some education with a lot of our academy lads who have been involved in the senior team and training with them as well. So getting their performance ready because they're likely going to be doing some work with them in pre-season as well. So having that more one-to-one consultation with them, what they can expect when they step up. I had the writing retreat as well. So I had a day of writing. And then Friday is just going to be a game of match preparation. So the firsts are going away. So it'll be loading the coach up, preparing the food for all of that, doing that really hands-on applied sports nutrition. The 21s have a match at home. So it'll be assisting with pre-match and things like that. And then when they're all playing their matches, I'm going to be doing some literature reviewing about injury prevalence. So
Love
it
it.
is so varied. It changes from every day. I was reading about the economic impact of an ACL injury as our player who has an ACL injury came in. He was bored of his rehab. He just wanted a conversation. So we just had a general conversation about,
Mm.
I can't remember half of the things now, really. But it's that disruption of sometimes reading, but actually I'm now fostering a relationship with a player that has having an intense nutrition support during his recovery. So yeah, it's so varied. It changes every day.
I love it. It probably works well for you, Sophie. Knowing you a little bit, you're always busy during the MSc and juggling jobs and stuff and conferences and it's reflected really well in how you've achieved things. I guess just to finish up, I want to ask you a cheesy question in a second, but what do we expect next? Or how do we follow what you do, and what are we expecting next in terms of the research side of things?
Yeah, so hopefully the paper that I'm doing at the moment, the longitudinal study, will be out in the next few months or so. And then also with the master student I'm working on, that's going to be a bit more longer recruitment for the nicotine pouch and impact on blood glucose as well. So hopefully those 2 papers are going to be out from like a research term. From me personally, hopefully the team stay where we are and we go strong into the next season. So yeah, I have faith. We've got the faith. We'll do it. But yeah, if you wanted to follow what I'm up to, then I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. Not very well with communicating it, but I'm available. I will always respond to messages if people want to ask questions. So yeah, that's the 2 things that
Yeah,
hopefully.
lovely. And I think it's important to have a network of people in the same sort of space. I'm sure you speak to other practitioners when you go to games and things, and having that network across all aspects of your life is super important, particularly when you are juggling almost 2 jobs in one. So just to finish up, I know you're a baker, and I ask a few people this question, but apple pie or apple crumble?
Apple crumble, despite the amount of times that we have it as pre-match food, is
Do the players? I mean, you probably can't. This might be a non-disclosure agreement. Do they have ice cream or custard?
normally custard.
Okay, okay, nice.
Normally custard, but there's been a request for sticky toffee pudding a
Oh,
lot.
I had it last week. It's so good. My daughter was literally licking the plate. and she just had toffee all over her face. It was quite. I mean, I'm there as a nutritionist saying, "Love it, go on, have enjoy yourself." My wife's there going, "That's our 4-year-old having so much sticky toffee pudding all over her face." But don't tell
Yeah, no, we do these
her.
Biscoff cheesecake
Oh,
bowls that they have on the coach, and
oh.
I do think the staff prefer it more than the players. I don't know genuinely how many times the players actually finish them. I think the staff finish them off first.
Oh, I love it. That's how you keep the staff happy as well, there, Sophie. Yeah, I want to really thank you for your time. I know I kind of sprung this on you as I do most of the guests that come on here. But I was really keen to have someone who's living it in a really difficult environment, doing a PhD alongside a full-time job, trying to get that balance right, how you navigate the challenges of being the first in the space, but also doing a good job both practically and in academically. I think you're doing a really good job, and to have a paper already published in the first year, I don't need to tell you this already, but it's good credit to you. Fingers crossed Derby stay up. I'm not a Derby fan. I don't really follow the championship, but it's for you, it'd be great. Let's see what happens in the next few weeks, and I will share your LinkedIn. And do follow Sophie. Do stay in touch with her, because it is so important for those who are embarking or thinking about embarking on a PhD. Even if you're going, I'm not doing football, but you are in a professional environment, I do recommend you build that network. And I'm hoping you found this really insightful and useful. And I really thank you for your time again, Sophie.
Thank you.
Cheers.